Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Jess Rainey, the Programs, Events, and Outreach Specialist with the Boulder Public Library. We have Kathy Lane behind the scenes doing all of our tech. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This event is part of One Book, One Boulder, which is generously sponsored by the Boulder Library Foundation. The One Book, One Boulder program aims to bring Boulder together through the shared experience of reading and discussing the same book. This year, the library has chosen to focus on the climate crisis, and we selected the book, All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. Yay. It's edited by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine Wilkinson. Before we begin, I wanted to note that this event will be recorded and available to watch afterwards. And all of our online events are an extension of library services. Library conduct and policies do apply in our online space. So thank you for joining us for this panel discussion. I'm really thrilled tonight to be learning from this amazing group of panelists. I was planning to introduce everyone and tell you about how incredible they all are and their backgrounds, but we talked about it and we thought that it might make more sense for them to introduce themselves and also share their stories and their motivations for doing this work. So we're going to go in alphabetical order and start with Beth.
Great. Can you remind me again of how long we were to take for our intro?
So this will be, so this will be 10 minutes for the three of you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So why I do the work that I do and how I stay motivated to do this work. The work that I do is really around using performance-based methods to support and encourage and invite young people to co-author an equitable, survivable, and thrivable future for all life and the ecosystems upon which life depends. The project that I'll share that is like why I do the work that I do, it helps to see it. So I had sent some photos that we might show now, whenever that, I'll just keep talking as the photos show. We've been doing work with young people, getting them out into the natural world. And we led them in looking at different bird species. And first we started with barn swallows, and then we went off to this is a red-tailed hawk. And we led the young people in making puppets and costumes that really helped them to embody these birds. And we made these into videos for art hikes for Open Space Mountain Parks, our partners. And why I do this work is to really do some deep shifts. There's some great quotes in All That We Can Save about we're not going to solar panel our way out of this crisis until we make these deep shifts in relationship to, in the book it says to mother, but what it's referring to is the earth. And I really wanted to design a narrative experience for young people to spend a large portion of their time outside reconnecting and a feeling of belonging as a part of the natural world. And I believe that if they do that, then they'll start to view the world differently, and they'll be voting differently. They'll be choosing careers in a different way. They'll be traveling in a different way. They'll be doing all these different choices that will impact climate. And the way I stay motivated in this work is that it just feeds me back. I love doing art making. I love touching things. I like the tactile nature of designing the wings that the young people could make for themselves and paint and have this embodied feeling of wings. It just resonates on so many levels, aesthetically, physically, and it feeds me as an artist, and it also feeds me as an activist and as an educator. We also write about this in our work, and I partner in this with Becca Safran, who's a professor of ecology and evolutionary biology, and her and I are really doing this side by side, art, science, coming together, and that keeps me motivated because that synergy, that energy between the two is really a generative space.
Thanks, Beth. Clara Deser.
Yes, hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jess, for organizing this panel and inviting me to be a part of it. I'm a senior research scientist at NCAR, where I lead the climate analysis section. And this is a group that's devoted to understanding climate variability and climate change. I earned my PhD more than 30 years ago, so I've been in the field a very long time. So why do I do what I do, and how do I stay motivated? I do what I do because I love discovering and understanding the connections within the climate system. It's a very interconnected and dynamic system. All the different parts of it connect. The oceans and the atmosphere alter our weather patterns. Changes in the sea ice in the Arctic affect thunderstorms in the tropics. And in turn, thunderstorms in the tropics actually affect how much ice is being melted. It's an amazing, actually, story that we're learning about. So it's fascinating and really underscores how interconnected all the different parts of the globe are. And I also study the effects of climate change, how fossil fuel burning is altering our planet, and I use the latest set of climate models developed at NCAR and institutions around the world. And these projections are extremely alarming, and what we're witnessing now in terms of extreme weather is just the beginning of an exponential increase of things to come if we do nothing to curb emissions. So these days, my work is driven not just by scientific curiosity, but also by the urgency of our impending climate disaster. So how do I stay motivated? Well, I stay motivated by working with other climate scientists around the world, especially the young ones who bring new ideas and understanding. And the research that we do collectively, and climate scientists are a very collaborative group. I think by necessity, we share our tools, our complex climate models, our data, but we're also self-selecting that way, in that way. And I think we truly know the importance of engaging with each other. So collectively, we try to do the work that helps to guide solutions to the climate crisis. I can give some specific examples if there's time later on in the Q&A. So I think I will leave it there and pass the baton to Lisa.
Well, I get to work with both Beth and Clara at times, and I really appreciate that. So I'm glad we're all here. I lead a small group that creates tools to help people learn about climate change, weather, air pollution, and all sorts of other earth science topics. We create curriculum, educational websites, museum exhibits, graphics, illustrations, games, storybooks, anything that can help people learn about the science of what's going on. And my group is at the UCAR Center for Science Education, which is connected with NCAR. I also write about nature and environmental topics, and I'm the author of, I've got a visual aid. I'm the author of Tales from an Uncertain World, What Other Assorted Disasters Can Teach Us About Climate Change, which can be found at the wonderful Boulder Public Library. And I'm working on a second book of narrative nonfiction right now. So I got into this work a little roundabout way. I used to research coral reefs, and I realized how dire the situation was for reefs. This was about 20 years ago. And for the most part, my research focused on fossilized coral reefs. They died thousands of years ago, long before it could have possibly been our fault. And but what I was seeing in the coral reefs today that were dying was most definitely our fault. And so, climate change was heating the seawater, and the corals were bleaching, and the carbon dioxide is getting into the ocean. All sorts of things are going on. And I recognize that corals really can't speak for themselves. And no ecosystem really can speak for itself. But I could do some of the speaking for them. And I could help people understand the problems that all these places that are wonderful were facing. So I kind of wandered away from the research part of science and towards the communication and education part of science, and I stayed there. So how do I stay motivated to do the work? That is one of those head scratcher questions that sometimes, and I'm sure we all feel that way sometimes, but I think learning new things is incredibly fun. And I just love learning about new things. So I assume everyone is like that, and which of course is not necessarily true. But I love learning about new things, even if that learning is about the potential apocalypses that we are facing. So that keeps me motivated. And I think that learning about problems is really the first step to solving them. So it can be terrifying, but it also demystifies those problems and lets us know what we're dealing with. And learning can make those global problems like climate change seem just a hair less monstrous and more solvable. So I like that.
Thank you all. So we're going to kind of jump into sort of the meat of the panel discussion. We have some guiding sort of topics that we decided on. And then at the end, there will be a Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions in the comments at any time, or you can save them for the end, and we'll get to those then. So we're going to jump into, we budgeted about 15 minutes for this next little set of questions. When we were planning the panel, Lisa, you mentioned that all we can save is an especially appropriate text for this community. So I wanted to ask, what is it like for all of you to do your work on climate change in this particular community in Boulder? So if you want to answer that first, Lisa, that might.
Sure. Since I brought that up, I mean, I know everyone around the world is seeing the impacts of climate change locally in their communities, and we are no exception. Last year's wildfires, the 2013 flooding, droughts, pine beetles just multiplying like mad in warmer temperatures and eating trees and killing trees. And this past summer with the terrible air quality caused by fires all over the West, I mean, it really. It was just incredibly striking. And I know so many people in this community who are overwhelmed by the climate crisis and feeling grief over what we're losing. Boulder's connection to the outdoors and natural space is very strong. And so if you know what you're losing, you're more likely to feel the grief over the loss. So I feel like this collection of essays and poems is just such a great fit for Boulder because it does an incredible job at acknowledging the very wide range of emotions that people are feeling, that people are going through. And of course, not everyone is going through all the emotions, but it's a range. But it also highlights so many voices of people who are actively working on solutions, who are helping. And so it sort of, acknowledges the grief and yet also acknowledges what we need to do. And I thought that was particularly appropriate for Boulder. My work, my climate education work isn't necessarily in Boulder. My group focuses nationally. And so my work involves a lot of communities all over the country. And I get to know different perspectives from different places, and that everyone has different things that they care about in this world. But I find that there are people everywhere who care about the environment and the future. And there are people everywhere who are scared and sad about climate change and its impacts. And it occurs to me that if you only looked at those political maps, and you'd see spots of red and you'd see spots of blue, and Boulder would be one of the brightest little blue spots. But there are people everywhere, even in the reddest of red states, who are concerned and alarmed about climate change and are working to help. And I find that really inspiring to be able to both be, connected to a community that is so strong in its commitment to help, but also to reach out to other communities and see that there are people everywhere who are making these incredible efforts.
Clara, do you want to address that question?
Sure. Lisa, that was just such a lovely response. Thank you. So what it's like for me to do my work on climate change in Boulder Boulder is a mecca for climate science. I think it has the largest concentration of geophysicists in the world, and climate scientists are number largely amongst them. And it's, of course, highly educated and informed citizenship, and it's a socially responsible and activist community. So this gives me very much a lot of energy, and I find that my work, which is mainly research oriented, is valued by the people of Boulder. And not only that, but the world looks to Boulder for leadership on climate science research. We are, one of a handful of preeminent places in the world for leading and guiding the understanding of climate change, and hopefully then leading to solutions for the climate crisis. And I just want to say that I feel extremely fortunate and privileged to have been able to spend almost my entire career at NCAR, where I get to interact with really the world's leading climate scientists, and also help to educate the next generation of climate scientists. NCAR has a very vibrant visitor program, and gives lots of student conferences and workshops. So Boulder can be very proud of its climate science institutions, which includes not only NCAR, but of course CU and NOAA and many others. And I think, we have a responsibility, therefore, in Boulder to really lead the way in informing the world about climate science, but also how to take action to solve the crisis.
Thanks, Clara. Beth, do you want to say anything about
Yes.
working in Boulder?
Well, due to the fact that I work at the university, I'm a professor of theater and co-rostered with environmental studies. The thing that I find about working in this community is that there are just so many partners that you can work with. You can have world-class scientists that can be, casual advisors for a piece that you're making. I got, Jim White, one of the most renowned climate scientists, is now our dean for arts and sciences, and he was an advisor for a project in chiming in. Patty Romero-Lenko, who used to be with NCAR, now is at NREL working on another project. She served as an advisor, and what I find is that my experience has been that scientists who they get over the hill of their own achievement, and they get to the top of the hill of their own achievement as in their own careers, and then they start going down the other side, and they go, oh, we need to disseminate this. We need to tell this story. And that's when they become really excellent partners to folks who are working in the arts and communication. And not that they wouldn't be before, but there's that kind of sage wisdom. And I really like to do, in all the work that I do, I really want it to be grounded in the best and the most current of the known physical and life sciences, so that we're really getting the science right. We're getting the climate solutions accurately. I partner a lot with Project Drawdown in that regard. And the next thing is really going to the social sciences to see what makes for effective climate communication. Let's not do things that actually go backwards, that actually cause more polarization. Let's not communicate like that. Let's not communicate about the global impacts when we know that the science tells us that we have to frame it as a local issue, so that we can, piece it out so that people don't feel overwhelmed and thus disengage. We don't have time not to be guided by the best of the social science research on effective communication. And then we need the best of the arts in order to take all that and then express it in a way that's going to, most of us make our biggest decisions on feelings. We choose a house largely on feelings, what car we might drive partially on feeling, who we're going to spend our life with in terms of a life partner, like how many kids we may choose to bring into this world. All these really consequential decisions are based in feelings. And as we go to really change the behaviors and, create these aspirational behaviors, it's going to be based on feelings of like wanting to join the next better party. It's not the old fossil fuel party that has run its course and is just not even, like with the pandemic, we realized a lot of those trappings were not even that fun. We felt burned out. We got this release from a lot of our consumerism and our fossil fuel based travel, and we felt some sort of relief, some sort of connection to the land that we're on. And for many of us, myself included, I've deeply changed my orientation, my knowledge of the earth. And the other thing about partnering in Boulder, being in Boulder, there's just so many great partners. And Betty Ball, who is the wonderful woman at Boulder, hopefully you know her. She was one of the people who helped start Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center. And she said, the best thing about the work, this kind of work for social justice, is the company you get to keep along the way. And the people that I've had the privilege of working with, Juanita Echeverry with Outreach, with Open Space Mountain Parks, such a beloved partner in this work, in doing the work that I just showed the pictures of from this summer, really just stayed with us and was nurturing this and so excited about the youth and bringing her perspective to them, helping us translate our videos into Spanish so that they would be, but not just translate, make sure the poetry was alive that the young people had created. So that kind of access to partnerships is what I love about Boulder.
Thank you all. I think I'm going to kind of combine the next two questions that we had. So I think we discussed when we were planning this, is one of the benefits of All We Can Save is that it has all these different ways of communicating because it's voices of almost 60 different contributors. So there's scientists and advocates and poets and policymakers. And you all come from such different backgrounds and expertise. And we titled this panel Creative Ways to Communicate about Climate Change. So how do you use those creative ways to help people understand climate change in a way that they wouldn't otherwise? Why do we need a diverse set of ways to communicate about climate change? So why don't we start with you, Clara? I feel like often like the scientists are seen as in this silo. So how do you actually get your science out in the world? So
Claire is not in a silo.
He's in a silo sometimes.
I know sometimes, and like, but that's so amazing is that like that you're not in that. So like, how are you doing that work to communicate and teach about climate change, and why is that good to have all those different ways?
Thanks for the question. I think it's such an important question. So I mainly give scientific talks, but I also step up and give public lectures around the country. And I really try hard not to oversimplify the science behind climate change. As I mentioned earlier, the climate system is highly interconnected and it is complex. And we don't want to sweep things under the rug. It has a lot of variability inherent to the system. We all are familiar with El Nino events probably that alter our snowpack in some years and not in others. And that is just a part of the climate system. And sometimes that variability can be confounded or mixed up with how humans are affecting climate, especially if we only have, a few decades of measurements of data to go by. So I think it's very, very crucially important to separate these two parts of climate, the variability that exists if we weren't doing anything to our system, and of course how we are loading the dice, I guess is the term, and how to really how climate scientists really grapple with this challenge of how really to isolate the two. And I think it's just incredibly important to guard against misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation about, that heat wave, that was all human caused, or it was all natural. Of course, it's a combination of the two, and just how much each contributes is the science. And that's what I try to do my best to be as clear as I can about that. So that's my science hat. But another way that I've been helping to communicate climate change is through music. And that may sound odd, but it's a passion that I've had for many years now. And music has always been just part of who I am. I think it helps me to connect with my emotional self. And so this communicating climate through music began when I sang in a Boulder chorus called Resonance. Some of you may know it. And one year we were, this is a 100-member plus a chorus of women of all walks of life and ages, etc. And we talk a lot in addition to singing. And one year we were discussing how emotionally overwhelming it can be to deal with the existential threat of climate change. So I stepped up and I decided, okay, I'm going to invite the members of the chorus to the seminar room at NCAR where I give science talks. And we're going to, I convened a panel to talk about the science being done at NCAR and, around the world. And people really appreciated that. And then I had my aha moment and realized that it's not me teaching the singers, it's actually they taught me. And they taught me something really important, this connection that music can have such power to communicate of course, our emotions. And really, you can strip away, don't need any equations to really say the fundamental science. You can just demonstrate things that go right to people's, right into their hearts. So I also felt like music, because it's a sort of a continuous medium, it can also be very suitable to conveying, this pace of climate change. It's not just the past and the future, but it is an unfolding sort of stream of change. And when it starts to feel threatening is, depends on how bad how hot our planet is getting and how bad it's getting. So long story short, this led to, I had the idea that maybe we could take the data from our climate models, and these are the same data that go into the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, these IPCC reports. I was actually part of the Nobel Prize winning report last time around. And so these are the same data that scientists use to, make their best efforts at projecting what will happen to climate change. And instead of conveying them in a dry public lecture, which I think really sort of completely defeats the purpose of getting people to care, I decided, what if we used a technique called sonification, which is simply mapping the data values to pitch and volume and different instruments. And so this is not a composition. This is actually the data playing the sounds, and then you hear, you hear with your senses how we are altering the trajectory of our climate system. So I emailed the sonification data artist, whom a friend of mine had just pointed me to his article in the publication called Scientific American, and I just cold call email to him, and I said who I was and what my idea was, and he wrote back within an hour and said, I am in. We didn't talk about funding. We didn't talk about, we just said, we're going to do this. And it took several years, and I'm very, very grateful to Lisa and so many others, friends and colleagues at NCAR and universities, that finally we ended up developing this, and students at CU, I should say also, thank you, to develop this new web application called Sounding Climate. And it is a play on words on purpose. And it's an exhibit at NCAR, but of course, NCAR right now is closed to the public. So the students at CU did a capstone project actually to develop this web application. And we're just at the point of releasing it. And I'm happy for you, anybody listening, to try it out. It's an exploratory tool. It's not right or wrong. We're not giving you a quiz. This is not about how well do you understand things. This is for you to do your own private exploration of climate change through music and maps. I don't want to play any clips because it doesn't really do justice to do it over the web, but I do invite you to try it out. And I very much am looking for, if you're a musician or a sound artist and you're interested in taking this project to the next level, please get in touch. I really believe in this kind of communication, and I would love to get this on people's, in the schools and wherever we can. So sorry for going on long-winded, but that's my maybe getting out of the silo, and I really believe in it. So thanks.
Thanks, Claire. We put the links to that in the chat, so you can check that out. I'll put the question back up on this screen. Lisa, why don't you go next?
Sure.
Why is it useful to communicate?
Yeah, well, I think referring back to the book, I mean, one thing that I really loved about All We Can Save was that it included so many different perspectives, and each author had their own projects, their own emotions, their own outlook, their own way of seeing the world. And this is a giant problem affecting every sector of the world. So it's not going to be solved by people with one point of view or one way of doing things. And having diverse ways to help communicate about the climate crisis can help us engage a diverse group of people with helping with solutions. And we need that because there isn't one silver bullet way to solve this problem. We're going to need a lot of people with a lot of different skills and perspectives. So I guess what I'm saying is there isn't one right way to help. And all these authors are contributing to something larger. And just like all of us can contribute to climate solutions in our own ways. And what I do in climate science communication and communicating other types of science too is I tend to lean on stories, which the essay authors of this book also did. And I think that was brilliant. We humans really, we learn through stories. And one reason that this is so helpful with climate change is that stories can help connect our real concrete lives with global climate, which can seem really abstract. And we're talking about global average temperature, but the temperature in my house is this much, and the temperature outside is that much. It's even very intelligent people can get boggled by some of the abstractions that come from looking at climate globally. But those personal stories can really make connections between that human scale world and the global climate change. And I also use illustrations and storytelling to help people understand climate change. In the exhibit work that I do, these usually are graphics that communicate information about climate change a little more straightforwardly. And in picture books and comics and things like that, the story is often communicated in both words and pictures. And it just adds another dimension to visually communicate about climate, but also kind of invites people in who would prefer images to words. And so there's that. But also stories can go through curriculum. And A story could be a story of discovery. And so I like to work on curriculum projects in which learners are kind of creating their own story about what they're discovering. And I think, we learn most when we're very actively discovering instead of being told how things work. And that's why, for K-12 classroom curriculums, these kind of curriculums that have a storyline where a situation unfolds and students are kind of exploring more and getting to build an understanding for themselves, it just adds much more personal meaning for those students. They now have their own story about how something works instead of just being told.
Thanks, Lisa. Clara was having a little bit of internet challenges, so she's still here. Oh. She was just turning off her video.
It's so invisible, Clara.
She's still here, no worries. Thank you both so much. And Beth, you do a whole different type of communication. I'd love to hear your answer as well.
So at the University of Colorado, we've been doing Phaedra Pizzulu and Max Boykoff and Becca Safran and I started something called Inside the Greenhouse, which is for creative climate communication. And then we went with some other folks in psychology and environmental design to create a thing called the Center for Creative Climate Communication and Behavior Change at the University of Colorado that we're very excited about. And the thing that we find is that finding these diverse ways to communicate about the climate crisis that don't put our backs up against the wall, that may never even use the word climate change in them. They may not even mention global warming. And a lot of these things are ways that we can, like we did at the University of Colorado this September, we did a show as part of our main season called Climate Cabaret. And we did a performance that had a lot of different music in it. I wrote a lot of the songs, so I'm super interested to hear about Clara's work. A lot of the songs, and some of them are very silly, like recycled toilet paper, make sure you buy, take from the roll to the tush, and then you flush. Bye-bye, recycled toilet paper. And they're just like really silly songs. And then there's songs that like use what people have done for millennia, which is more than millennia, is using anthems to get people to like show up and hum these songs afterwards and find that resolution to act. And we had this, the beginning song and the ending song for Climate Cabaret was, we are enacting climate, we are enacting change, throwing a better party where we can all rearrange. With people over profit, put species side by side, rivers get a vote here, as do all the oceans wide. And then there were verses that built upon it. And at the end, when the whole cast, and there's all these wonderful young people on stage singing out, we are enacting climate, we are enacting change. I dare you to have a dry eye. It's just like, it just means so much to have our young people coming together in song and voice. So that's one way that like, I think of that diverse set of ways of communicating the climate crisis through music is definitely one. Another one that Max Boykoff and I have really been working on a lot and have so much love and passion and energy for is climate comedy. And we've really written many academic articles on it. We have one that's in consideration right now. We've been doing an Stand Up for Climate Change live comedy event for the last 6 years. We had to go digital the last 2 years. And we, it's like when you get onto something, we do these Earth Day shows. We have an international competition where people can submit videos that we've been doing for 7 years. And, you're doing something that people like. And then, we had a foundation come up to us and just say, hey, I really want to support it where people aren't just screaming at each other about climate. Here's some money. Go expand what you're doing with this climate comedy. So we're doing this thing, coast to coast climate comedy for Earth Day this coming year. And we have the funding our class, it's like, it's not usual that you have a $25,000 budget for a class, but we do, so we're going to work together with our students to put on a show, and we're going to do it coast to coast. And then there's a group in London that wants to be in on it too. So we're adding and across the pond, and who knows who else may want to get in on the action, but we're really looking at supporting people. And what we find is that when we do research on our students, when they are participating in the creation of good-natured comedy that's kind in intent and that has the environment's best interest in mind, is that it helps them process negative emotions. We tend to go away from the issue of climate change if it only is associated with negative emotions like despair and guilt and shame and fear, which are a lot of the common emotions people may feel. But if we start providing situations where it's not even heavy lifting about communication of technical things, it's just communication that provides an opportunity for positive emotions to be felt when just dealing with the issue of climate. And we find that what our research is showing us is that in and of itself can create a sustained commitment to climate engagement and thereby climate action. So we're really interested in finding these spaces. There are spaces for the heavy lifting of here's the science. And then there are spaces of celebration where you can get these kind of smaller messages that may be very sticky because they're in the coming at you from a medium such as climate comedy. There's one thing that I don't think anybody will ever forget. There's one of our comedians that we worked with this past year, a professional comedian. We had 15 different professional comedians come into our class because it was a COVID year and partner up with our students to make climate comedy that was rooted in climate solutions, that was in line with the science, accurate, and informed by the social sciences for what makes for good, and funny because it was professional comedians doing it. And that secret sauce of matching our students, who are our environmental studies students, who could really ensure all that accuracy and that best practices with people who actually know how to be funny, was like. And there was one comedian, Johnny Beaner, who's from Madison, and he was given the biodigesters solution because there's a lot of scatological humor, a lot of poop jokes. And when he found out that his piece had to be about biodigesters, and which use sometimes agricultural waste, like agricultural waste, but also farm animals poop and even human poop, he said in his piece, he said it was a little bit like when I was told that by my group that this was my solution. It was like they gave me a beautiful birthday cake, creamy frosting, and they said, here, make this delicious. He said, that's about how hard it is to make biodigesters funny. They're already funny. And so, like, you really remembered it. And that combining of the comedy, you don't get as much content across, but the content you do get across, I think, is really, people are really engaging with it and remembering it.
Thank you all. So just as like a time check, we're at 6:42, and I want to make sure we have some time at the end for Q&A. But I also I want to be able to hear from all of you about the next two questions.
We'll try to be more brief.
No, I'm loving this. I just want you to be aware of where we're at in terms of time. So one of our challenges as the library is we are not content experts. So when we do one book, we're not the content experts, which is why we're so thrilled to be doing this panel with you all tonight. So our next question is kind of, can you give us tangible and broad steps or small steps about what can we do to solve the climate crisis? And that's a massive topic that could be so many different panels. But we're like very cognizant of not just saying, oh, don't use plastic bags and everything will be okay. So I would love to hear your kind of sort of more nuanced expert opinions.
Yes, Jess, there is a simple 3-step method to solving climate change.
Tell us, Lisa. Tell us now.
Stop messing with climate. No, yeah, I mean, I think it could get boiled down a little too much in this format, but for those of you online who have read the book, you'll notice at the end it's a short section of strategies called the Drawdown Strategies that are fantastic. And but I'd really recommend going to drawdown.org to learn more about those strategies and why they're helpful and how they'll get us to this point where more greenhouse gases are getting sucked out of the atmosphere than we're adding. I mean, that's what we need to get to. And so I'd really, on a very practical note, recommend that, which is a way of saying there's a lot more learning to do. But we can do that. But I also wanted to recognize that a lot of people who may have tuned into this tonight are here because they have some communication skills, and I guess I would like to invite them, if they feel comfortable talking with others about climate change. We really can't solve this problem if we don't talk about it. And so I'd love for everyone to feel invited to do that. I'm probably all of us here are invited at some point to answer climate change questions outside our day jobs, like informal chats with neighbors and random people in elevators. That doesn't happen as much due to COVID now. But I once explained climate change to a lady in a sauna, which was a little like we were experiencing rapid climate change while also talking about it. And it really, like, we were just in hysterics by the end, because like it really kept I had to be brief in my answer. But now that so many people know about climate change, I'd love it if more people felt comfortable jumping in and having these little chats. I mean, I'm talking like a minute or two, and without shaming people, without making them feel bad about, driving their car or anything like that, but just to get that conversation started. So maybe they start thinking about those things. And you really don't need to be an expert to communicate that climate change is a problem like nothing we've ever faced before. And it's a problem that spawns other problems, like stronger hurricanes and more inequality. And we do have the ability to stop it. So, I mean, that you can see how that kind of sauna conversation could happen before any of us pass out. Like it doesn't need to be all the specifics, but I feel like there's a lot of very informed people now that could start those conversations and not have it become really, combative and unproductive with the person, but really open the door to that kind of chat. And so, I just want to throw that out there and invite whoever is online here to feel welcomed into having those conversations.
I'm trying to remember the author, but I know there's one of the essays in the book is how to talk about climate change.
That was Catherine Hayhoe. She is a evangelical Christian. She's a wonderful climate scientist, and she always tries to find the person's values, get to know what they value, and then that's how she connects, the climate story in terms of how it might impact what they value. And I think it's an extremely, it's just a very humane way to talk and respect, the other point of view and the other person. And then also, climate change is going to affect, one's grandchildren's lives, or however you want to put it. I mean,
there's always some common ground to be found. Exactly. And I really, once in a while there is not common ground to be found, and you might want to back away very slowly, as if you're encountering a bear in the wild. But that's my strategy. You could do whatever you want, but I think more often than not, there's some common ground to be found. And I find that those conversations often lead to, just more understanding of both the crisis and each other. So, yeah.
Exactly.
And Clara, you mentioned not oversimplifying as being a really important part of how you approach this.
Exactly. I think, then the conversation can devolve and people start to point fingers and say, well, climate scientists, you told me that it was going to get warmer where I live. And actually, I live in Washington, D.C., and it's gotten colder and snowier in the winter. So you're full of it, and you don't understand the science. And
just back away slowly, Clara. Just like the bear.
Then what I can say is that's exactly what we're expecting, that not everywhere is going to experience climate change in the same way. And for a while, it can be hidden by this inherent variability. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that the climate changes over, a decade or even a few decades. So all of that is within our complete understanding of the climate system. It doesn't, it is facetious to say that it negates, the fundamental, scientific understanding of the climate system. So, and I don't have to be combative about it. I just, that's what we expected. In fact, from about the early 2000s to about 2015, the planet as a whole actually didn't warm up very much. And again, people said, okay, not a problem, global warming. Actually, it's a huge problem because now, and that global warming was masked by this long period of these La Nina events, if you know what those are. And again, we know climate science knows about this, and now that phase of that particular type of climate oscillation has now flipped its phase, we're experiencing accelerated global warming. That accelerated global warming doesn't mean that it's all entirely human caused. So there's the flip side as well. But the point is that what we're doing now by adding fossil fuels to the atmosphere is there is no doubt it is going to lead to exponential climate extremes, and you have to change. Bring those emissions down in the next 10 years. So there's no doubt about that. But I do try to, in terms of not oversimplifying, that's how I, try to convey that message.
Thank you. So we're at just about 9 minutes left. So I think we'll kind of start wrapping up. But Beth, I want to make sure that you have some time to address. And when we were planning, we were saying we have to end this discussion on something of a positive note. It's so paralyzing, and the book does discuss climate grief, which can be so overwhelming. So what gives you hope in doing this work? And Beth, if you also want to say anything about the last question, we'll start.
I'll combine the two. I love the line in the book on page 47 at the very top where it says, "We are alive at the last possible moment when changing course can mean saving lives on a truly unimaginable scale." And that's just true for us. And we are alive at a time that is, we're alive at a time where we can have such an impact. And I really want to, I think reading these books is essential to fortify our inner conviction, but we need to be acting. We need to move beyond awareness and education. We need those things, but we need to move beyond them to action. And it needs to be integrated into our daily lives in ways that bring us joy, because joy is the thing that is sustainable. I just went shopping at Goodwill, and I got a really cool sweatshirt for my daughter for Christmas for Lorato. And it has all these flags of all the cool countries. I don't want to say which countries are cool, but there's the flags going down. And I'm going to wash it, and I'm going to give it to her for Christmas, because the fashion industry has an enormous impact on the climate. I'm going to normalize the action of repurposing gifts for the holiday Christmas season, which is the holiday we celebrate during the winter season. So I would just say that what are the ways that you can activate? We don't really listen to what each other say. We watch what each other do. When I see my friends getting an electric bike, guess what? I want an electric bike. I think that's cool. And that's one of the top climate solutions if you look at Project Drawdown. So we can't shame people or wag a finger of what you should do. We have to make these pro-environmental behaviors aspirational and irresistible. And we do that by showing them, by giving fabulous repurposed gifts, by riding on that bike proudly, by not flying and saying, you know what, I'm not gonna go to that bachelorette party in Vegas. I'm just not gonna go, and I'm gonna, do a video for you instead. That's gonna be so cool, and it's like such a tribute to this person I love. We're gonna find these things that are just gobbling up fossil fuel consumption, and just write a new story that's actually more fun and maybe more nourishing, and maybe a better way of celebrating somebody who's about to make a lifelong commitment. So I think that's that retelling of the story, but it has to be, we have to be acting, and we have to look at those top solutions. The top solution is reducing food waste. We can go to Nude Food and like find the new jars. I can't wait to go. It's on Walnut Street somewhere where there's no packaging, and you can go get your food in jars and then bring it back. I can't wait to go. And then we can eat together. We can plan ahead with all these ways. We actually have an exhibit right now at the Boulder Public Library, Recipes for Change, Young Women's Voices for Climate, has a whole thing about food, this food metaphor of like, food is the solution. Having a plant-rich diet is one of I think the third top solution by Project Drawdown, and then reducing food waste. So all this emphasis on food has a huge impact. And then I think it's just activating all these really fun, cool solutions. I also want to I'm putting in the chat right now, we created a thing called enactingclimate.org, which is taking the Project Drawdown solutions and adapting them for 5th grade learners. So we're going to be putting up on this same site all these different skits, songs, activities, games that we can play that activate these solutions in ways that kids really start to understand them and associate them with action.
Thank you. Lisa, what gives you hope? Oh, and actually, before we move on, quick question that someone was asking if your student performances are open to the public.
Oh, yes. We have, if you look to CU Presents, we're going to have the Climate Cabaret up there very soon. We had a lot of people didn't feel comfortable going to a theater just yet, so we made a professional video of it, and it's going to be through CU Presents for Climate Cabaret. And then at the Inside the Greenhouse website, we have videos of, we have the live broadcast of our climate comedy shows that we've done this past year and the year before. So yeah, they're open. Sometimes when they're done in schools, then that isn't open so much, but yes. And also happy to consult or encourage. I'm a professional encourager, so. I'm like done building a career. I'm just here to help. Like, let's just do this.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, Lisa. What gives you hope?
Hope. Okay, right. Hope. So I guess sort of thinking about how the book, it included a lot of grief. And I guess I wanted to give a shout out that grief can be really helpful too. That it can tell us what we care about and what's really important to you and what you want to save. And so I know grief is not necessarily something you want to bring to the party, but I think that it can really help people find direction that they want, specifically that they want to go to help, because not all of us can do everything. But also I wanted to note that it can be hard to feel like you're doing enough, like you're solving climate change enough, especially if you're making small scale changes, like a lot of us can. It can feel like my dad, I think it was my dad, someone used to say in my family, like bailing water out of a boat with a teaspoon, like that it can seem futile. But I need to remind myself I'm not the only one with a teaspoon. And there was a great quote from this. It was actually one of the essay authors quoted Mary Oliver, the wonderful poet, who said, "May I be the tiniest nail in the house of the universe, tiny but useful." And I guess I strive to be a tiny, useful nail. And I think that's what we can do.
Love that. We do have a couple questions in the chat, but we're almost out of time. But Clara, I want to hear what gives you hope, and then we'll try to take one question.
I have to say this panel gives me hope. Just meeting you, and this conversation, and the book, it all gives me hope. And I look to individuals to give me hope. and especially younger people who are taking such bold action towards solving the climate crisis and also recognizing it's part of the larger social justice movement. And there's so much science being done to develop innovative technologies for green energy. And I actually think that it's individuals who are in a position in industry to actually lead the way, and governments will follow. And just this past Sunday, I was reading in the New York Times a riveting article about a mining tycoon in Australia, Andrew Forrest, who a few years ago decided to get a Ph.D. in marine biology, coming from being a mining iron ore. And he has now, because of climate change, and he's now in the process, this huge company that I think produces a third of the world's iron ore, in the process emits more CO2 than a small country. And they are now implementing technology to convert those sets of iron ore mines into green energy using windmills and solar power to produce the electricity, to turn water into hydrogen fuel. And that is truly an inspiring act. And he has the miners all behind him, and they love to be part of this revolution. They are smart, they want to do something, and it's interesting. Like we're learning how to do things better. We're not just doing the same old. And that's what gives me hope. And, I think the political process is too slow and definitely not working in this country anymore. And I think what gives me hope are these individuals who take bold action and lead us.
Thank you all. So we don't have too many questions in the chat. We have one right here from Max, and he says, how can we use our resources to communicate with the event staff at the UN Climate Summit and insist they change the temperatures in the room via the thermostats to stimulate a real-time association of the effects of climate change? Wouldn't that be interesting?
So this is like the sauna kind of approach. Yeah. And not tell them. Like that would be even better. It could just be sort of a performance piece that they're all, they're all experiencing. But
Yes.
Yeah.
I would add to that, actually, that you also want to turn up the humidity and the heat.
Oh, good point,
Because
Clara.
that is where we are headed.
Mm-hmm.
And, at a certain point,
So it's more of a
before the temperature, it goes higher, that the body just can't, evaporate and cool down. And that point will be reached sooner as the humidity rises. I think that's a really good idea, Max.
Yeah, I love that. There's someone who does work in Madagascar, and she was chiming in the whole time, just celebrating what you all have been saying and doing, and that she's doing the work. So that's awesome. I'm just going to see if there's any other chats. We're almost out of time. We kind of talked about a couple questions ahead of time, and this was one of them. And one of the sort of unusual parts of All We Can Save is that it is all female contributors. And they talk about, really giving a voice to the people that don't often have a voice in the climate movement, and having it not only be feminist, but feminine, and diverse and inclusive, making sure that everyone feels included. So I would love to hear your thoughts on how we help the climate movement become even more feminist, diverse, and inclusive.
Well, I feel like one thing that this book does, or made me realize, I mean, really not until I got to the end of it, because you're in everyone's individual stories, and it wasn't until I got to the end of the book that I realized that this is a community that formed. Like, I mean, there's like 400 pages of community in here, and everyone's doing their own thing, and it's all helpful. Like, it's not that we should do this instead of that. Less debate. Like, there shouldn't be wind instead of solar. Like, that's moot. Like, that's silly. But instead, it's more of a yes, and we should also do all these other things. And I think that attitude was sort of woven in somehow to the book, that all these actions are helpful, and there isn't one sort of, that is better than another. We don't need to put down the actions of the person helping an individual community after Hurricane Maria, and say that's less useful than doing something else. No, they're all useful. And so that was one thing I took away. And I don't mean to make it sound like that's something that is particular to women, but I think it's something that might be a little stronger on that side of the gender fence.
Beth or Claire, do you want to say anything to that? And then
I feel like the book really ends with a call to what women do bring, in terms of, and not exclusively. So I don't mean to say that, but it is so important, this nurturing of each other and holding each other up, so that we don't sink. and I don't know. It gives me hope that we do have this. We understand intuitively how important it is to help each other, to solve this crisis.
I just think we're at a time where we need all hands on deck, and we need to be benefiting from the lived experiences of everybody. Mm-hmm. And we have systems in place that privilege, and we have statistics in place right now. We've never had a female president. We don't know how it would be different if we had a female identifying president for this country, because it's never happened. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see what would happen if that ever, not to say that woman is a monolithic thing, but I think that there are characteristics that we can attribute to certain lived experiences. And I'm also super interested. I'm enormously hopeful, based on the Young Women's Voices for Climate that I've been doing for the last 4 years with so many amazing people, Chelsea Hackett, in this town. And if Boulder is just one example of what these young people, when they come together and put their heads together, and the amount of care and ingenuity and chutzpah and just energy and commitment they can bring, I think we can do this. And I think that we just need the full participation of female identifying people. And we also need queer theory. We need to decolonize. We need to, dismantle the dominator systems that play out on the earth and on women's bodies so much. And they're measures of control that aren't helping, they're hurting. And what we need to do is just allow for the full participation and contributions of everyone.
I wish we had more time. This has been so amazing. I'm so grateful for you all participating and joining us and reading the book and sharing your knowledge and your expertise. This has been phenomenal. And thank you for everyone who joined us tonight online.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you so much to Kathy, who is behind the scenes managing all of the great links in the chat. So thank you so much, Kathy. I also want to thank the Boulder Library Foundation for their generous support of this and many, many other programs at the library. And I would love to invite anyone watching to join us for other One Book events, including a conversation with the editors of All We Can See, which will be on November 4th. You can register and find the link in our chat. We'd love to have you for that. And with that, we will close this event. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
And thank you, Jess. That was amazing.
Mhm.